Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome in to the members live stream. Looks like I'm finally doing this stuff right. I've got the chat all hooked up here. We've got Yellow Dog in the chat. We've got that one candy bar in the chat. Aaron's in the chat. Which candy bar is it, by the way? I've been meaning to ask. What is the one candy bar that we're talking about here? I would love to know. What's up, Sherm? If we can go, I don't know if we're on that level, if I can call you that or not, but welcome in. Happy to have you guys here. So awesome. So I have a pretty loose structure for what I want to talk about tonight. You guys can jump in with topics, questions, whatever. I'm just going to talk through the injuries to Shaheed, Ayuk, Godwin, talk about the DeAndre Hopkins trade, try to just give my general take on what the outlook is for those players, what the outlook is for the rest of the team, and probably get us through till right about when kickoff comes. Well, I think we're all excited to see Kupp and Puka back in. Might as well just say this right now. I am starting Puka in a few leagues tonight. I certainly don't feel super confident about it, but it's just too tantalizing not to. So I'm going to be playing him. And I'm not playing him over like stud receivers, but I am viewing him as like an upside wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 2 type of play. So I have him in over Xavier Worthy in one league, for example, where it's like, I certainly don't have a lot of confidence in him either. So I'd rather just play Puka, who I think has, he's the better player, better upside. You can definitely start Kupp. I feel better about starting Kupp tonight, just because it was always the plan for him to come back this week, and it doesn't feel as much of like a last minute thing. Like he almost could have played last week. So I think he's going to be, closer to 100%. But either way, I am playing Puka in a few spots. So if you want to go down with that ship, feel free. But did we get an answer? Oh, okay. The one candy bar is a Snickers. Pretty good candy bar. Not my favorite, but definitely a good one. What's up, Dan? Welcome to the live. This is great. We've got a bunch of people in here right now. Awesome. All right. So we'll start with probably the least impactful, maybe the least painful of the injuries, which is Rashid Shaheed. Just because, he wasn't a player that was super expensive to acquire. He wasn't a guy that was necessarily carrying teams, although it was certainly a pleasant surprise that he came out this year and really broke out, took that next step. In hindsight, maybe we should have seen it coming a little bit. His per route numbers have always been really good. I was definitely skeptical that could scale to a larger role, but he was just dunking on me every week with a 40-yard touchdown, and it was great to see. So it's a bummer that he's going to be out for the year. Weird thing about Shaheed is that he's not as young as he seems. This was his age 26 season this year, so he'll be 27 next year. Not to say that, that's obviously not that old. Like he should come back fine and be totally usable again next year. But I have moved him down. Let me double check here to the late 2 part of the rankings, I believe. Let me just check. Rashid Shaheed. Yeah. So I moved him down. I had him all the way up at early 2, just based on the targets he was commanding. His role was really good. But he's down to late 2. You know, it's hard to justify anything higher when you have to hold him till next season. And he's not necessarily a guy that's going to be a difference maker when he comes back. He's just going to be kind of one in a bunch of wide receiver 2 types. So I don't have him too far off from Godwin, actually. I have Godwin at the bottom of the base 2 tier. I have Shaheed down in the late 2 tier, right around guys like Trey Benson, Daniel Jones, Adonai Mitchell. So, you know, I think that's probably right about where he should be. And I don't know too much about his injury specifically, but I don't suspect it's something that will. It was a meniscus repair, maybe. Yeah, that's what it was. It shouldn't be something that hampers him long term. In the meantime, with the Saints, I don't see how this isn't good for Chris Olave, who honestly was driving me kind of insane this season. His peripheral numbers haven't even been bad. They've been fine, pretty close to what they've been in years past, but I've been kind of waiting for him to take this next step forward. I think he might get bailed out a little bit with this injury because there's just not a lot else in the offense. You know, you've got Kamara, he's going to get his targets. And then it's like Bub Means and Mason Tipton and Jawan Johnson, Foster Moreau. So there's not really anybody else to command a lot of work. So if Olave is not getting like a 28% target share at this point, I'm going to be pretty frustrated. I'm probably going to have to move him down. But his per out stuff has still been good. Like he's been up over 2 yards per out run this year. He's had the partial game that he played. He's had some weird game scripts where the Saints barely threw the ball. And there was other game scripts where they got boat raced and they couldn't move the ball. So the hope is that this just kind of settles down. I don't think we're going to get wide receiver 1 type of numbers from him, but I'm still hopeful we can see high-end wide receiver 2 production for Olave. It's just so much has lined up for him in his career to be an impact wide receiver, and I'm just not sure why it hasn't all come together for him. But if you guys have seen the rankings lately, he hasn't really moved. He's just sitting in that 1.25 base ones tier, but throughout the year, we've seen London kind of jump past him into that next group. And then we've seen other wide receivers kind of move up, creep up behind him in Jaden Reed, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers. So he's much more in that group now where he's not necessarily, you know, a cut above those other wide receiver 2s in the rankings. But as far as other players on the team, I don't know how much it really affects anyone else. It's not good for Derek Carr when he's back to lose that downfield threat. He already wasn't a very high ceiling option. He still remains kind of a, you know, whatever, mid-low end QB2 type of start, matchup dependent, I'd say. It doesn't really affect Kamara. You're not going to want to play Jawan Johnson. Bub Means is definitely a guy worth stashing. Like, I picked him up in a bunch of leagues after the Shaheed injury. That's probably old news at this point. I suspect he's rostered in most leagues. I don't think he's probably not anything, but he's a guy like in a deep dynasty league. He's going to run a lot of routes. He looks like he's probably the better between him and Tipton, just based on the last couple games. So, you know, he's a speculative ad. Sure, Dan, we can talk about London. Deserve more of a bump closer to the Brian Thomas, AJ Brown, Puka tier. That's possibly true. I mean, he is very close to Puka. He's only 2 spots. They're all in the same tier right now. I just have London at the bottom of that tier. So I have AJ Brown at 18th overall, Brian Thomas at 19th. I have Puka at 28, right after Garrett Wilson at 27, and then I have Drake London at 30. So it's not a terribly wide spread. Like this tier goes from 1.5 to 2 base ones. So I would have London closer to the 1.5 there and AJ Brown closer to 2. Now, I do feel pretty strongly about AJ Brown and Brian Thomas over him, where I would add to London to get there, because two things I think. So I think London does have something working against him, which is just that the way that he accumulates points, he's not as likely to have these big boom weeks, because he's very much like he very much catches kind of these in-breaking routes where he just sort of compiles targets. It's actually not that different from Puka. He's kind of playing the Puka Nacua role in Atlanta. But he's not quite as good after the catch as Puka. He's not quite as like dynamic. And so I think this recent run of just scoring touchdowns every week has been great, but I'm not sure that he's ever going to flirt with like top 5 overall in a season. Whereas I think AJ Brown and Brian Thomas just have that next gear, that next level that they can hit. With Puka, it's definitely super close. I'm deferring to him because he did it for that whole year last year as a rookie. We'll see. Like they're pretty close at this point. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. I definitely have him close with Puka, like pretty negligible difference, with a slight deference to Brown and Thomas, because I do think their ultimate ceilings are higher. Aaron asks, what are your thoughts on Kenneth Walker's long-term value? Do you think he can get to the top tier of dynasty running backs? I mean, he's probably, again, I technically do have him in the top tier of dynasty running backs. I have Bijan at 20, Breece at 21, Gibbs at 22, and then I have Kenneth Walker at 29. Oh, and I have Achane at 26. So I have a pretty tight spread between these top 5. I think it's a clear top 5. And I could definitely be persuaded, I think, into moving Walker ahead of Achane. But the 5 of them, I think, are clear cut. I think they're all right there. I don't see a reason to move Walker ahead of the other ones, because he is, I think, the oldest of the group. Not by a lot, but he is the oldest of the group. And I do think, like, we've seen Breece have this resurgence where his usage is now right there on par with Walker's, even maybe a little bit better. And then Gibbs is the tough one, because he's not even like technically the starter for the Lions, but there's so many fantasy points to go around for their running backs, and he's just so freaking good. And there's the kind of an almost unlimited contingent ceiling in any instance where David Montgomery's hurt. And in the meantime, you have this incredibly safe player who's still going to average like 17, 18 points per game. So he's a very unique asset in his own right. We've seen Bijan come on these last few weeks. I think it's really hard to go wrong between all of them. I have Walker 4th or 5th in that group, but I wouldn't be adding anything significant on top of Walker to go get the other ones, I'd say. And as a follow-up, where do I see Ashton Jeanty fitting into this puzzle? If he goes in the first round and it's any kind of normal open backfield that he's landing in the first round, he's probably the RB1 in Dynasty, because the talent's not going to be in question. Obviously, the draft capital is going to make him look fantastic in all of the statistical models. And then he comes in, he's going to be by far the youngest now of all of the like high profile RB1s. With those years, those rookie contract years are just so valuable. So I suspect he'll be the RB1 in Dynasty before he steps on the field. That's my guess. But at the very least, he will be right there with this group, and probably near the top of it. So moving on to Brandon Ayuk. He wasn't actually having a very good season, as we all know, before he got injured. It's hard for me to say exactly what that's about, because I don't really question the talent with him. We've seen multiple years of him being one of the better wide receivers charted in reception perception. He had one of the most efficient seasons we've seen in recent years. Last season, over 3 yards per out run. So I don't think it's an ability problem. I think it's possible that the slow start to the season for him is just a matter of not spending a lot of time with the team. In the offseason, Kyle Shanahan is very much a planner, a schemer. So, maybe he designed the game plan early on around the other weapons on the team because he wasn't sure if he was going to have Ayuk. That's a thought, but he was under, I believe he was 10 or fewer fantasy points in like 5 of his 6 games or something like that. He really only had the one good game. I'm kind of just throwing all that under the rug. I think he's the same guy that he was last year, but now you lose the rest of this season. And with the injury coming in, somewhere near the middle of the season, you have to kind of worry about him being 100% to start next year. He turns 27 in March. So he'll be in his age 27 season the next time that we get him on the field. I think it's a pretty big hit for him, if I'm being honest. I think I've moved him down to the very bottom of the late first tier. Yeah, he's the very last player in the late first tier. So that's where I have him for now. I could even see moving him. I don't know. He'll probably stay there. What I'll say is he's not a player I'm willing to trade a first for. So there are some players that I value as a late first. Like their overall value is worth a late first, but he's not a player I'm ever actually going to send a first round pick for. And because what would be the point, right? He's not giving you points now. I would just rather get the rookie coming out next year. But like if somebody was offering me an early second for Brandon Ayuk and I have Brandon Ayuk on my squad, I would be asking for a little bit on top of that. So that's how you get the late one valuation. But most of the players that I put in the late one tier are not guys that I'm genuinely excited to go and trade a first round pick for. So that's where I see him. And then it's much more interesting to kind of look at the pieces left behind in San Francisco, because this is typically such an efficient offense that when there is that vacuum of opportunities, it goes somewhere. And you have Kittle playing out of his mind right now. He is somebody that if you have a team that is in bye week position, like at least within striking distance of a playoff bye, but maybe tight end is a weak spot, I think you could justify trading your 2025 first for George Kittle. That's how good he's been. That's the advantage that he's providing right now. And that's not going away with Ayuk now out. So great for Kittle. He should keep doing what he's doing. Debo, when he gets back from his pneumonia, he should be a little bump for him as well. I struggle to see him as still being a wide receiver 1, but high end wide receiver 2 definitely in play for him. He's going to have those big weeks, where he gets a rushing touchdown or he breaks a big yak play or something. So Debo and Kittle are going to be must starts. It's probably doesn't move the needle much for Christian McCaffrey if and when he's back. Like he's always going to get his stuff. So it doesn't really move me with McCaffrey, but you do have to be excited about the prospect of him returning, knowing that they're in such need of playmakers. They're absolutely going to be, trying to get him incorporated in all those old ways they used to as quickly as they can. But then you have Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. I don't know what to make of Jennings as a player, just what he's done throughout his career, because he's been buried behind these other weapons, but he just really hasn't shown us much before last playoff run. He was good in the Super Bowl, obviously. And then he had that crazy game earlier this year. We've not really seen that stuff from him before. So I don't know how real it is, but he's probably going to play X for them. And I mean, I would think so. I would think he would be that guy to kind of play outside and play X. Debo moves around. Pearsall, I think, would fit best in the slot. So, he's going to be out there. He's going to get opportunities. I think I moved him up to early third, something like that. Early third. Like, I'm still not willing to send out a second for this guy because I just don't know. Again, I don't know how real it is. He's still in this crowded offense. You still have Pearsall there as with his first round draft capital. You have Ayuk that's going to come back. You still have Kittle. So, you're getting this partial season of usable production. He should be a flex worthy guy is my guess. Like a 11, 12 points per game type of guy, because the 49ers offense is going to be potent enough. He's going to be in scoring opportunities enough that he should be usable. Pearsall is interesting though, because he has the draft capital. They have every reason to want to get him involved. Clearly they saw something in him that they wanted to invest in him heavily. He comes out last week, whatever, 3 catches on 5 targets. He wasn't exactly expecting to have that type of a role coming back in his first game after the injury. So he's the one to monitor. He could be the one rising up the rankings very quickly if he really starts to monopolize a lot of work here. I don't think it's something you can really get ahead of, because anybody that's been holding Pearsall this entire time is going to certainly want to hold him and see what they have now that he's actually going to play. But I would say if we're talking next week, if he does have kind of a bullish performance, he might be in that buy high territory where maybe we are trying to buy into him before people fully react. But that's all speculative. Like I don't know yet how good he is. We have to see with a full week of preparation, full week off the injury, how efficient can he be? Because he's probably going to run most of the routes. And I believe the Niners play the Cowboys, so hopefully that's a high scoring game. Hopefully that goes back and forth. But that'll be the guy to watch. Because right now I have him, I think, in base 2, which is pretty much what you paid to get him in the first place. No, I have him in late 2 right now. I should probably put him in base 2. Yeah, he probably belongs in the base 2 tier. And if we see a good performance this weekend, he could move up to early 2, just like that. Aaron asks, is Bowers a first-round startup pick if you drafted now? I think pocket passing quarterbacks like Mahomes are bound to drop in rankings, and wide receivers and elite tight ends are going to move up. Elite tight ends, plural. I don't know about that. If you find a second one, you should let me know. I don't have it ranked that way. I do have Bowers at 17 right now. But it's compelling, right? It is compelling to pass on the quarterbacks because they just don't. Some of them are coming around for sure. Like I think, Joe Burrow and Jordan Love have certainly been better lately. Lamar is obviously tearing it up. Kyler's been up and down. Patrick Mahomes has been abysmal. I don't know. That's probably the best answer you're going to get. I think it would be justifiable to take him on the 1-2 turn in a tight end premium, maybe with another quarterback or something. Yeah, no, it's a totally reasonable thought. I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to do. I'm just really struggling to figure out if I would do it. If Bowers is going to keep up what he's doing now, I think the answer has to be yes, because in tight end premium, he's scoring like 20 points per game. That's more than most wide receivers that you could draft there. And he plays tight end, so you're getting an even bigger advantage. So I think it has to be a possibility. I guess the question is, can he sustain what he's doing now? I don't know why he can't, right? Because he's certainly not being propped up by the quarterback play. He's certainly not being propped up by a brilliant scheme. He's genuinely just super talented. I don't know, if the Raiders were to add another legitimate pass catcher to the mix, Like if they took a wide receiver in the first round that was really good, what might that do to the target distribution? I don't think it would massively hurt Bowers, but does it bring the ceiling down a little bit? I don't know. So what I would say is he's definitely in play. I think you're right that he should be in play there right at 12. The other players, that would be in consideration there would be like Burrow, Kyler, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe Nico Collins. Those are the guys that you would have to consider there. Caleb Williams as well. So I think that's a fair question. It's a fair question. What I hear is that there is a mid-season startup draft happening amongst some members of the Discord. I'm only slightly offended that I wasn't invited to participate, but I'm definitely going to ask to see the draft board and see how that goes because I'm very interested. Apparently they're planning to still have a championship this year and have an abbreviated season, and then, obviously carry it forward into the future years. So that'll be really weird for strategy purposes, how people draft that one. Oh yeah, I think I did see Dan mentioning that he wanted to get in on that. So yeah, Dan's in there. My friend Chris, who moderates the server with me, is in there, and some of the other usual suspects. So I'm gonna be keeping an eye on that one. And if I get jealous enough, I might have to do my own, but we'll see. I'm gonna try not to. All right, let's talk about Chris Godwin. This one hit me the hardest personally because I have the most Chris Godwin across my leagues. I have him on some pretty good teams. In fact, I think all of the teams I had Chris Godwin on are either the 1 seed. I think I have 2 teams that were the 1 seed and one that's the 3 seed. And one of them is so stacked it'll be fine. One of them is a best ball league, so it doesn't really matter how stacked I am. It still hurts to lose him. And then the third one is going to be kind of a mess. But either way, he was playing out of his mind. I mean, I called him a sell a couple weeks ago on the live stream because he was just outperforming his usage like every single week. And he just kept doing it. He was just dunking on me week after week. And I still had him on some teams, so I wasn't mad about it. But it sucks to lose a player averaging almost 20 points per game. And it really sucks the way that it happened, in a game that was totally out of hand, really no reason for the starters to be playing at all. And then he gets the dislocated ankle, which doesn't sound fun at all. So I moved him down to the base 2 tier. I think that's fine to put him there. The thing about Godwin is like there's a pretty specific, you have to have a pretty specific circumstance to really want to go out and buy him. Like when a young player gets hurt, it's pretty easy to go out to like the rebuilding teams and try to offer that young hurt like Rashee Rice to the rebuilding teams, and then you get productive players. But like he's going to be 29 next year, so the rebuilding teams aren't necessarily eager to acquire Chris Godwin, and they're not going to give you picks. Like who's going to give you picks for Chris Godwin if they would just rather have the picks? So he's kind of a weird player to handle at this point. And I think that in some cases you can probably trade him for guys that are down a tier. But some names that are in the vicinity that you could at least try would be like Khalil Shakir, maybe. James Conner, if you're just set on I need points this year, I need to replace Chris Godwin's points, he's a player you could get probably. It's tricky. Like I have him somewhat near Keon Coleman. I probably need to move Coleman up a little bit. I have him half a tier behind Coleman. But again, I don't know I can't think of the situation where a team would want to trade Keon Coleman for Chris Godwin, because like you're using Coleman as like a long-term upside piece. You know, maybe you could add something small, like a third, and get Amari Cooper, David Montgomery. Maybe you can go cross position and see what you have to add to get into Evan Ingram or David Njoku. But it's tough. I mean, I'm genuinely like racking my brain looking for these opportunities, and I haven't had a chance to trade him in any leagues yet. You know, maybe you can pick up Darnell Mooney and like get a third, get a couple fourths added in. I don't know. It's ugly. You might have to just go out and use other things to go get a replacement and just hold on to Godwin on your bench until next year. I did see him traded straight up for Jacoby Myers in the Pure Potential Invitational League. I think that that's fine. Like, I don't think it's I need to move Jacoby Myers up. Why do I have him down so far? I think that that's fine. I don't think it's amazing, but he can definitely replace, you know, some of that production. I would aim a little bit higher first, but okay. But in terms of the Buccaneers without Chris Godwin, I think Mike Evans, if he can come back from this hamstring injury healthy, they think like week 12 is when he should be back. They have a week 11 bye. He's set up really well down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. Without Chris Godwin there, he should be able to consolidate a lot of the work. He might be desperately chasing that 1,000-yard mark, which I think that streak is pretty valuable to him. So, you know, who knows if that plays a factor at all. But he could be a sneaky buy low. Could be a sneaky buy low if a team's like really desperate right now that lost Mike Evans. If you can go scoop him up, you know, for like late second value, or go send off some bench pieces that aren't necessarily cracking your lineup every week, and you can just hold on to Evans and maybe use him later on this year. That seems interesting to me. Jalen McMillan is the exciting rookie in the mix. He should be playing in the slot with Godwin out. That's going to be a more natural fit for him. He played entirely in the slot in college. I was kind of surprised that they weren't using him there. You know, lo and behold, he doesn't really have a lot of impact through these first 6 or 7 games. So I would be looking to see what McMillan does playing in the slot. Not getting over my skis with him. I still have him in the early 3 tier. I'm not going to go buy him sight unseen for like a 2nd round pick or anything. But just a guy to monitor moving forward. I don't think there's anything really with like Sterling Shepard or Trey Palmer or anything like that. Those guys are like desperate, absolutely desperate flex plays at best. Cade Otton should get a bump, as much as it pains me to say. I hate everything that Cade Otton stands for as an inefficient every down tight end who doesn't really do anything special. But Cade Otton's going to be startable at this point with Godwin out. Like, a lot of those intermediate targets are probably going to funnel to him. So Cade Otton in tight end premium might be a little bit of a younger Hunter Henry in a sense. And then Rachaad White, another player that I just despise. He's going to be more useful because they're going to draw more passing work for him. They're going to get him more involved in like the screen game. He's the best route runner of the running backs. That's something he does well. So Rachaad White lives. Cade Otton lives. I think it's a hit for Baker, especially for the next few weeks with Evans and Godwin out. You know, I talked about him in the video today as a sell high. You can still play him. But I do think that this puts him more in the like high-end QB2 range. It's just really hard for me to imagine him continuing this insane run that he's had, especially with the touchdown passes, without his top 2 touchdown receivers in the game. Like, it just seems really hard for me to wrap my head around that. So that's where I'm at with Baker as well. Yeah, Rachaad is probably going to be a great play this week with Bucky ruled out. Can probably fire up Sean Tucker too as a flex play. So we'll just have to suffer through that again. I have one more share of Rachaad White I would love to sell, and this league I'm in just is full of people like me that can't stand him. So I probably won't get anything for him, but it's fine. It's fine. All right, we'll close this out with the DeAndre Hopkins trade. This one was pretty exciting for me personally. I have DeAndre Hopkins in 6 of my dynasty leagues, 6 of 22, 23. So, you know, about a fourth of my dynasty leagues I have DeAndre Hopkins in. And this is pretty much, I mean, as annoying as Patrick Mahomes has been for fantasy, certainly an upgrade over playing with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. So I'm pretty excited to see what Hopkins can do. His peripheral numbers have been good. I was preaching his good word all offseason. He had a yards per out run over 2 last year. He had a top 10 target share in the NFL. He was just on a team that refused to throw the ball. They were dead last in pass attempts. So that was really the limiting factor there. Obviously, the quality of the pass attempts wasn't very high either. This year, he's been a little below those marks, but he was coming off of that sprained MCL to enter the year. He was really eased in terms of his snap shares and route shares early on, and the offense has been completely non-functional. So I'm not holding too much of that against him. I haven't seen reason to believe that he's washed. The Chiefs at least don't think that he's washed. So this is exciting. I mean, I would say I'm exercising caution this week just with him getting involved in the offense this first week. Who knows how much he's going to play. But I would say rest of season, I'd be expecting wide receiver 2 type of production. I mean, we saw Juju Smith-Schuster put up 7 for 130 in his one game. My hope is that Hopkins can take on some of that work and they don't just make him like a downfield go route receiver, because that's certainly not going to be very productive in this version of the Chiefs offense. But assuming that they have a plan to use him in a way that's sane at all, I do think wide receiver 2 numbers are in play. This is just bad for the Titans overall. Like, Ridley was already not startable. The quarterbacks were obviously not startable. We'll see if this has any effect on Pollard and Spears. Like, the passing game getting worse is not going to help open things up for them. It's not going to help them get in scoring range. So, you know, a slight ding to them. Nothing crazy there. But as far as Hopkins, like, he's a guy you can go out and try to buy. There are probably teams that are completely out of the mix that have Hopkins. He's not been helping them. They might be willing to sell for like an early third, maybe a couple of thirds. I did move him up into the late 2 tier, just right around where I have Jacoby Myers, right around where I have Romeo Doubs. He's certainly a guy you could trade a very late second for, and I think that's fine. But as always, I'm always going to try to get these deals done without sending seconds, without sending first if I don't have to. Try to take a lot of kind of garbagey assets, package them together, see if I can get something for what is functionally nothing. That's always more appealing to me. But yeah, a very late second is reasonable, you know, if you have to plug a need at wide receiver. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I'm still not excited to start Patrick Mahomes in fantasy until further notice, till he shows me something. This has to be a little bit of a hit for Juju Smith-Schuster, who I thought could be the PPR scam rest of season, but he's not even playing this week anyway. He's hurt. And it's probably a good thing for Xavier Worthy. It probably opens up some more opportunities for him, gets the press coverage away from him and over to Hopkins. So I wouldn't be dropping Worthy in the rankings. I think if anything, this will be a benefit to him. So if you guys have any other questions, anything else you want to talk about, hit me up. Let me know. Chat went kind of quiet for a while there, last 5 minutes or so. So let me know if you want me to hit on anything else before we wrap this up today. Just gonna see if there's anything else going on in the chat, members chat, that I didn't touch on yet. No, not too much going on. There was the Laporta and 2 firsts for Brock Bowers question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's probably an irresponsible amount to give up for Brock Bowers, but also I don't know if I could actually trade him away for that or for anything, to be honest. All right, Dan's got a question. When you have a guy like Neighbors on a rebuild, do you hold? Most of the time, yeah, I try to. If I have those like top 15, top 20 type of guys that are legit difference makers, that are really, really hard to acquire in trades, I do try to hold those guys. So Josh Allen's, Jaden Daniels, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb, etc. Because they're just nearly impossible to acquire otherwise. Like you can't just trade them away and then next year go and buy them back. So I do typically try to hold on to them. You just have to be aware of what kind of a tanking battle that you're in. And sometimes if you get in a spot where you can't justify holding on to one of those guys because it's going to cost you the 101, if you're in that spot and you can then get fair market value for that player and it nets you the 101, then I'm cool doing it. So that sometimes is how it works out. But obviously you don't want to go like selling low on those players to get the 101 because then you're undermining any kind of value gain that you would have gotten. The other situation where you might have to sell those players though is if you have a really low value team. So, sometimes you're just rebuilding because you get knocked out, your players don't pan out the way you hoped, whatever, and you still have plenty of value to work with, buying power to work with in the offseason. But sometimes you end up with these really top heavy teams where you have, maybe you have Justin Jefferson and Josh Allen, but you don't really have much else. You just have a bunch of guys that are worth like late seconds and thirds. You don't really have other pieces. So at that point, you might have to take the superstar asset and break that down into multiple pieces, because if you break down a Malik Neighbors into 3 firsts, right, maybe you don't end up getting a Malik Neighbors type of asset back, but those 3 individual firsts have the chance to gain value, each of them individually, where in the end you have a chance of gaining more buying power overall versus just holding on to Neighbors who can't really get any more valuable than he already is. So low value teams do often get backed into breaking down those superstar pieces into multiple separate bets. You said trying to move him for a guy like Penix plus 3 late/future first getting shut down. No, I mean, I have him in the 3 to 3.5 base first tier. It's just that most teams aren't going to have the buying power to withstand. That's not a word. Withstand that type of purchase. So I think that that's right on the money in terms of what you should be asking for. But most teams are just going to be too hesitant to pull the trigger on that because, you're really exposing yourself to a lot of risk by trading away those future firsts, and you don't have a lot of buying power to maneuver to get other things that your team needs. So you'll probably be better off holding him. And you don't want to compromise on the value, when you're talking about an asset of that quality. So that's how I would see it. Oh, man. All right. That was a good one. Good time talking with everybody tonight. I'm going to settle in with this Thursday night game. Going to do a couple more team breakdowns. Try to get those caught up a little bit from the last few days since I was not having a good time the last few days. But we are back. We are kicking. I'm ready for some Rams Vikings stuff. So hope you guys have a good night. Hope you win your matchups this week. And hope you are set to make the fantasy playoffs as well. I'll talk to you guys soon. I'll see you in the Discord. Have a great night.